Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Okay, today we're looking at a massive, and I mean literally paradigm-shifting, change in technology and wealth creation. What if I told you that the most valuable company of the next decade might not be Apple, or Microsoft, or Amazon, or even Tesla? What if the company that's going to totally redefine global infrastructure is one that is quite literally reaching for the stars? Today, we're breaking down the business mechanics behind SpaceX. We're going to look at how they morphed from a startup everyone doubted into an absolute industry game-changer, and we'll explore the very real possibility of them reaching an unprecedented, jaw-dropping valuation. So let's just dive right into it. It's a huge question, right? Could SpaceX actually become the most valuable company in history? I mean, we're all so used to looking at digital software giants or consumer electronics as the absolute peak of corporate valuation. But there's a really strong argument out there, based purely on business fundamentals, that the next trillion-dollar giant isn't going to be born in some Silicon Valley garage coding software. Instead, it's out on a launch pad, building the physical backbone of an entirely new frontier.
To kick things off, let's look at part one, from bankruptcy to dominance.
You know, to really wrap our heads around the trillion-dollar potential of this company today, we've got to look back at its near-death origins. When Elon Musk founded the company back in 2002, the early years were, well, they were brutal. Back then, space was basically this exclusive playground for massive governments and deeply entrenched defense contractors. Private space exploration, people thought that was literally impossible. And for a minute there, it kind of looked like the critics were right on the money. Between 2006 and 2008, SpaceX suffered 3 consecutive, totally devastating launch failures. They were running completely out of cash. I mean, they were down to their very last dime, with just enough capital for one final attempt. If that late 2008 launch had failed, SpaceX would almost certainly not exist today. But that do-or-die fourth launch actually succeeded, and it changed the trajectory of the company, and honestly the entire industry, forever.
That single moment of success was the ultimate pivot point. As it's often said, what began as a risky startup became one of the greatest business success stories of the 21st century. Overcoming those seemingly impossible odds did something super important. It gave SpaceX real credibility. Almost immediately, NASA stepped in with massive contracts. We're talking a $1.6 billion lifeline that secured their immediate future. Suddenly, investor attention dramatically shifted. The momentum they unlocked just by surviving that near-death experience, that is exactly what powers the massive enterprise we see today. It completely transformed them from this reckless gamble into a proven, reliable operator.
Moving on to part 2, building space infrastructure.
Okay, so here's where we really need to shift our paradigm, because viewing SpaceX as just a rocket company is a huge misunderstanding of their actual business model. Think about the most valuable companies throughout history. Wealth creation on a really massive scale almost always follows infrastructure. Think about it. The titans of the 19th century, they built the railroads, transportation infrastructure. The titans of the 20th century built telecom, communication infrastructure. And of course, the giants of the last few decades built the digital infrastructure of the internet. SpaceX isn't just selling joyrides on rockets. They are building space infrastructure. They're basically lowering the barrier to entry for an entirely new economic frontier. When you look at them through that lens, their economic purpose for investors becomes staggeringly clear.
For decades, the space industry operated on this incredibly expensive, highly inefficient model. Basically, you launch a rocket once and then you throw it away. I mean, imagine for a second booking a commercial flight across the Atlantic Ocean, and as soon as you land, the airline just throws the entire airplane into the trash. That would be insane, right? A single plane ticket would cost millions. Yet that's exactly how rockets used to operate. By stark contrast, the SpaceX model hinges entirely on reusable rockets. They launch them, land them, refurbish them, and fly them again. This completely changes the game, dramatically driving down the cost of actually getting to space.
And this reusability, it builds this incredible economic flywheel effect. It's a pretty straightforward 3-step process. Step 1, that reusable technology directly lowers their launch costs. Step 2, those significantly lower costs naturally attract a massive influx of customers who previously could never afford access to space. And then step 3, this bigger customer base generates way more revenue, which gets pumped right back into funding further innovation. This cycle has created an absolutely massive competitive moat. Because they are so incredibly efficient, SpaceX now launches more rockets than pretty much anyone else on the planet. Their launch frequency is completely unmatched, which really just cements their leadership position.
Which brings us to our third section, Starlink's recurring revenue engine.
Now let's pivot away from the rockets themselves to the company's hidden financial powerhouse. The crucial thing to grasp here is the massive financial difference between occasional, transactional revenue from rocket launches and the absolute holy grail for investors, monthly subscription revenue. This is where Starlink enters the picture. Starlink is this vast satellite internet network designed to provide global coverage and, more importantly, generate highly lucrative monthly recurring revenue.
While a rocket launch gets you a massive one-off payment, an internet subscription brings in cash reliably month after month after month.
Billions. That is the magic number you need to focus on right here. This represents the billions of people worldwide, especially those living in remote or underserved regions who still don't have reliable broadband internet access today. That is an absolute behemoth of a total addressable market, and Starlink aims to solve that exact problem. If you can capture even a fraction of those billions of people paying, say, around $120 a month for a subscription, the revenue opportunity isn't just large, it's paradigm shifting. Some analysts look at this market and genuinely believe Starlink alone could eventually be worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
But as you'll see, SpaceX is far from a one-trick pony. Their business model is highly diversified and incredibly resilient. You've got commercial satellite launches bringing in serious cash. You've got deep, long-term partnerships with NASA and government defense contracts providing this bedrock of absolute stability. And growing right alongside all of that is the massive slice of Starlink subscriptions. Companies with this level of diversification, especially when paired with a rapidly growing recurring revenue base, are exactly the types of businesses that command premium, top-tier valuations in the market.
Now for Section 4, the hype and the reality.
So let's talk about the investor perspective for a second. Every single day, everyday folks are furiously searching for news on a SpaceX IPO. But why the frenzy? Well, first off, there's an intense scarcity of private shares. Most ordinary investors just cannot buy in right now, simple as that. Second, investors are absolutely desperate to capture that early-stage explosive wealth creation. They look back at the people who bought into Amazon, Apple, or Microsoft super early on and just held through decades of growth, and they want that exact same opportunity. And finally, it's that compounding value we were just talking about. SpaceX isn't just attacking one single market. They're simultaneously dominating space transportation, global internet, defense, and potentially even future Mars infrastructure.
Because of all this compounding value, you've probably seen the headlines asking, will Elon Musk become the world's first trillionaire? It's a flashy question, for sure, driven by the fact that a massive chunk of his personal wealth is tied directly to this high-growth private company. But throughout this explainer, we really need to pivot away from the noise. Smart investors, they don't focus on flashy headlines about individual wealth, they focus on business fundamentals. Becoming a trillionaire requires extraordinary, uninterrupted growth over many, many years. The much more vital question to ask isn't about Musk's net worth at all, but about the bedrock foundation of the company itself.
This leads us to our final section, risks and realistic takeaways.
Let's just ground the hype for a moment here, okay? Because no opportunity is without risk, and honestly, the sheer volume of risks here is pretty daunting. You've got regulatory challenges from governments all over the world. There's the constant looming threat of technical failures. I mean, space projects are incredibly complex, and physics is notoriously unforgiving. Plus, there's rapidly increasing competition in the sector, geopolitical issues surrounding global internet provision, macroeconomic downturns that could dry up funding, and just enormous execution risks. In the space industry, a single, highly visible major failure can instantly shatter investor confidence and stall operations for months, maybe even years. So yeah, growth is absolutely never a guarantee.
But despite all those risks, there are some incredibly valuable core lessons here that you can apply to your own strategies, even if you never buy a single share of an aerospace company. First up, tackling incredibly difficult problems through true innovation builds massive competitive moats. Second, long-term thinking is absolutely essential. I mean, SpaceX spent years and years developing their tech before they sought any major financial success. Third, total disruption of stagnant industries creates the biggest opportunities. And finally, patience. Real wealth is built by holding exceptional, paradigm-shifting businesses over the long haul, rather than just chasing short-term news cycles.
Which brings us to our final thought to leave you with today. We've seen the near-death history, the brilliant infrastructure model, the massive recurring revenue potential of Starlink, and of course, the undeniable real-world risks. So the ultimate question is this: will SpaceX create lasting economic value that genuinely reshapes the 21st century? Or will the immense complexities of space prove that a trillion-dollar valuation is just a bunch of atmospheric hype? It's a fascinating question, and watching the answer unfold is going to be one of the most exciting economic stories of our lifetime. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and always keep looking closely at the fundamentals.